Welcome to the RVA Returners Podcast, your newest source for all things Final Fantasy TCG. Why did they switch to the static pictures all of a sudden instead of the...
It depends on who, where the tournament is and if they have a camera in front of them.
Because I was more impressed with how my man was not blinking for this entire time. But what else I'm impressed with is that we're back for the next episode. Guys, welcome. Welcome back to this is episode 9 of the RVA Returners Podcast. We're just trucking right along. I'm quite happy with that. As always, I'm your host, Chris Adams. With me, as always, is Adam Lane. Still no Drew. I guess he's been real busy with the new job these last couple weeks, or just schedule's been a little off.
Yeah, he's been real busy with a lot of stuff. So
yeah, I can understand that. Real life gets in the way, but we're coming to you on Mother's Day. This is a special Mother's Day episode of the RVA Returners Podcast. No, there won't be any mothers on the podcast because I don't think they'd understand what the hell we're talking about. But we do want to take a moment to recognize all the mothers in Final Fantasy lore, at least all the ones we can think of. Because as we were going through this,
there's not many.
Turns out it's mostly about dads, daddy issues. Final Fantasy daddy issues. There it is. But the only ones that came to mind. First, I think the low hanging fruit there was Genova.
Yeah, Braun.
Braun is another one. As Garnet's stepmom, you were saying.
Yeah.
You see Cloud's mother. You see Titus' mother.
A lot of them are unnamed.
Yeah, they're just random there, or they die, or So Square Enix, I doubt you're going to listen to this, but you know what? Show some moms some love and some Final Fantasy moving forward. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah.
But yeah, man. We took a week off last week. We had a lot going on. I know I've been busy. Not so much with just work things, but I know, I've been really going hard with Magic right now. Dominaria has its hooks in me. I'm loving it. But did you go to Robin's wedding last week?
I did. I was in Milwaukee.
Milwaukee. I believe that's Algonquin for the good land.
It was actually the weather was pretty nice. It wasn't freezing cold.
Nice.
And then other than that, last week and a half, I've actually been playing a little bit more fighting games, but it's not
Yeah, you won a Tekken tournament this week, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. That's well done, sir. Well done. Yeah, Tekken probably the best fighting game out right now. At least I would think so. Anyway, the other stuff just had a lot of high hopes, but then we shot it back down. But that's the wrong podcast for that.
Yep.
But we're back. We're back in the flow of things. Tournament season is still there. We got. We're not going to Toronto, but that's in a week from now? 2 weeks?
I want to say it's the last weekend of this month.
Yeah, so that's 2 weeks from now. Then we've got, I know we got the Zorn and Thorn Cup June 2nd?
The week after Toronto.
And then in 2 or 3 weeks after that is Kansas City.
Yep, which we still have to buy our plane tickets for. It's happening. It's just...
I just need to know what the hell's in Kansas City that's causing flights to be so expensive.
It's called the Richmond Airport.
God, even Dulles is expensive, which blows my mind. But it's what's fun to do in Kansas City? Pack up and move. I kid for anybody living in Kansas City. It just seems like not so much because when you look at flights to destination places, you can get why they're expensive. Like flights to Boston for PAX. You know what? We get it. Why you're just flights to Boston in general. I get it. I don't understand why they're so expensive. Now, granted, it's going to be, we got to do what we got to do because I definitely want to qualify for nationals. That's
I kind of wish that I was going to Toronto because I think, and it's not a knock on everybody that's going, but I do think it's probably going to be the easiest one to qualify for.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because it's a lot of things. One, you have to have a passport, which I don't have, so I can't go. Which I do need to get. I'm probably going to start the process this week.
Yeah, definitely
getting one.
Same.
Because there's really no reason not to have one.
Yeah, I'm 35 years old and been you know what, I need to get my passport done. It's on my list of adult responsibilities that I've just been putting off for the last decade and a half.
Yeah, and then I think on top of that, it's not a very easy place to get to. But it might be cheaper than Kansas City, honestly. It is a little bit closer for us.
No, yeah, it is.
But it's not that much closer.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have at first it was on part of that convention, and then they kind of knocked it back to where you only have to have a 1-day pass, which is kind of nice. But it's still a bit more pricey than the other tournaments.
Sure, I know people were pretty heated about that initial con cost for that. But,
yeah. So a lot of different factors, but I think there will still be some strong players there. I just think that
comparatively,
yeah.
Sure. And there's also been a lot of tournaments happening across the pond in the last couple of weeks. A lot. They're in just the meat and potatoes of their like tournaments.
Because all their regionals are happening, and their Nats are very soon. I think I read, like I said, I read that their Nats are at beginning of June. So I think the week that we'll be playing Zorn and Thorn Cup, I think is the week of their nationals.
Jeez.
So
things are happening real fast over there and happening very plentiful. So it's been nice to see the decks and results. I know in the most recent episode of the Chocobros podcast, they were going over some of the lists and some results and stuff like that. I was actually listening to that on my way over here. Yeah. Those guys always do great work. Sam and Zach, keep up the great work. I love listening to you guys. But so that kind of leads us into the real heart of what we're talking about. And this is going to take up the majority of our podcast, and that is what we do to get prepared for a tournament. Everybody does it differently, but I think that it is a process. I know trust the process is what we're saying here, but there's a lot to it. Like it starts with seeing what the meta's looking like, because I know in this game there is a what am I trying to say here? People love to build their own brews in this game. Yeah, it's a lot more in this game than it is in other games per se. But
well, okay, and this isn't a knock on the game. I love this game a lot, but we definitely our player base is smaller, so it lets you have room for that, and it makes your meta a bit less defined.
Sure,
because the more people you have, it's like attack by numbers kind of thing. Like, the more people you have, the more data you have, the more defined your meta becomes.
Oh, absolutely.
And the faster people figure shit out. It's not to say that we don't have smart players that know how to figure shit out fast. It's just, like I said, we're not as popular as, some of the other bigger hitting card games.
Like a Magic or a Hearthstone.
Yeah, I mean, Hearthstone's crazy because it's a computer game, so everybody's just clicking and playing it, So you have, a lot of data at your fingertips, and so the meta gets flushed out really fast. Whereas Final Fantasy, you'll see decks here and there, and something will still pop up, before a new set comes out.
Yeah.
So...
I'll say the perfect example of that was probably in Opus 4. Mono Ice didn't really become... It was always there. Yeah. But it didn't become, that meta-defining deck until really coming down the home stretch of the meta, and maybe that's just because the people that were playing it, maybe lists weren't getting shared, or it wasn't getting the attention that it was.
Even then, too, you have the three areas. You have America, or you have, North America, you have EU, and you have Japan, which are, the big three areas that play. Australia, too. They have a good player base as well. And they're very different. Or at least actually, in Opus 5, it's starting to come together. You're starting to see a lot of the same stuff being played across all three regions. In Opus 4, that was not the case.
No, not at all.
And I think EU was, on the Mono Ice train very early. And I think they've been on the Mono Ice train for a while. But, we were still, playing a lot of water over here. And, even during the whole thing during Opus 4.
Oh, absolutely.
And then Japan was Mono Fire, let's go.
Mono Fire with 3 other colors, and okay, you got it, man. You know what you're doing.
So, but I think you're starting to see more people playing the same things across everywhere.
Well, that, and I think more people are, because the player base is growing.
Yeah.
I wish there were some hard numbers about what it was a year ago compared to now. People are paying attention to what's happening in other metas, and and I guess that might be a catalyst for the similarities, because people are seeing, over in Europe they're playing this type of deck. Well, let's try that over here, or talk through it. See, why is that good? And more people are picking up on that, and they're playing that particular archetype. There might be a card or two difference, but at the end of the day, the core of the deck is doing the same thing.
Yep, and I will say FF decks and Mognet and stuff like that really help you see those things.
Absolutely.
And they have a lot of good things on those sites that let you see what's winning, the ratios of cards and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And it helps. I mean, I wish there was more stuff like that out there.
Absolutely.
And I wish we had just had more results on there in general. But I think it's getting a lot better.
It is. I know we're getting pretty good about posting any results we have locally. Not that I'm saying that the Richmond local meta is going to define the game, but I think if more people are doing that, it gives people more looks at things, and and maybe something that somebody tried will be or something that somebody built will inspire you to maybe build something that could become meta defining. But that's typically where it starts. So told you all that to tell you this. The meta is what's going to determine really where you start. Your testing, because you can homebrew till you're blue in the face. You go to a major tournament. The big decks, you're going to see them.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you feel about. "Oh, I don't like the net deck. I don't like the meta." Well, guess what? You want to be in a tournament. You want to play in a tournament. You're going to see these decks, and you better know how they work, and you better know how to interact with them.
Yep.
And so that's the first step. Understanding the meta is where you need to begin.
Yeah, and I think like you said, like knowing what the top decks are, and knowing how whatever your deck choices are interact with those decks, as well as maybe just like some wonky interactions in general.
Absolutely.
But you should at least know how to deal with like what's considered tier 1 and probably most of what's considered tier 2. But that gets kind of like foggy in this game.
It can get very foggy, so. and then the next step is I call it the next step, but it's also kind of the initial first step is what kind of player are you? Do you like more aggressive strategies? Do you like more mid-rangey? Do you like more tempo-y strategies? Do you like to play more control decks? Because that's going to determine where you land as far as what you're going to play.
Yeah, and I'll even say this too. There's also like outside of like what types of decks you like to play. There's also like mindsets that people put themselves in, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like you got like players that like myself. I'm gonna play whatever the fuck gives me the best chance to win.
Sure.
But I have to also be comfortable on it. So like, and that goes along with having the best chance to win. So it's like putting in the reps, being comfortable on the deck. Is the deck good? Like the deck has to be good for me to play it. And then there's people that might not necessarily want to play the best. I think there's also like a category of players that have stigmas toward like certain cards, certain types. Like even you for a little, like you don't want to play lightning.
No, not at all.
Certain things like that. And it's not just you. There's other players like that too. Like I'm sure there's people that are like, fuck ice.
Oh yeah.
I'm never gonna play ice.
But I'll tell you right now, if push came to shove, and if mono lightning, even though mono lightning is one of the best decks in the game, if it was like the best deck in the game, there's a good chance I'd get over that to play it, because if it gives me the best chance to win, I'll at least humor the idea. I'll at least test it, play against it, so if I don't play it, I know how to beat it.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think in this game, at least right now, it's hard for a deck to get to that point. I think
it's very true.
I think the game's very well balanced. So like, I don't think it's ever gonna come to the point where like one deck is like the end all be all.
Yeah, because I think at that point the game's going to have a huge problem if you roll up to a tournament and repeatedly the same deck is making up 5 or 6 of the top 8, or it's making up 50 to 60% of the field. Then they're going to have to start looking at bans, restrictions, maybe format rotations. But right now, like that's not an issue. Are there some really strong cards? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Minwu's stupid. Alcid's stupid. Cagnazzo's really stupid. Alua's really stupid. But these cards are, they're not going to just win. They're not going to make the deck you're playing just unbeatable.
Yeah,
I guess I'm saying
games,
that wrong.
Yeah, they win you games. They're really strong cards, and they're strong for a reason. But they don't like there's reasons to play other things too.
Yes,
and I think that's how you create balance. And there's ways to beat those cards. And granted, some of them are pretty oppressive in the right deck, but I mean, it doesn't I don't think it's gotten to the point in this game where it's like I got to play this card to win a tournament.
Right, but you need to know what those cards do.
Oh, yeah.
That's the big thing. So if you're sitting across an opponent who's got mono, they're playing mono water, be it monsters, big water, whatever, you know when the Cagnazzo turn is coming. So you need to do what you can to prepare for that, be it with having some kind of answer to respond to the scholar bump, or have something to respond to its coming into stacking his ability so you can deal with him before that ability goes off. Like really understanding the sequencing, or you know what I mean, being able to have an answer for those cards and knowing when it's coming. That's when the reps come in, getting the reps in with the deck, playing the matchups.
Yep.
So you can see the puzzles kind of coming together. And a lot of this, it's theory before you start putting cards to table. A lot of it is...
There's a ton of theory. I mean, it's a game where we put cardboard on the table that has text on it. I come from... I've played card games, and then I switched to fighting games, and now I'm back to card games. And in fighting games, there's tons of theory, too, but there's also a lot of unknown, because you're not on the screen when you're talking theory. I could talk a matchup all day in a fighting game, but you still have to put it on the screen.
Yep.
In a card game, it's technically all theory. If you think about it, it's just about playing to your... when you're playing the game, it's more about playing to your house, knowing what cards are left in your deck, all that stuff. But it's not to me, it's a lot different than a fighting game, but there are similarities.
Well, yeah, like the mindset has to be the same as far as like knowing, like when you start talking matchups and this stuff, like you got to look at, like, say you take mono ice versus fire ice, put those two decks at their most optimal build, and put them in the hands of the two best players.
Yep.
How's that matchup going to go? Is it going to be a 5-5? Is it going to be a 6-4? Is it going to be a 7-3? Just because of the nature of the cards, but then what happens there is you start taking variance into account. What if this ice deck has all the tools to beat that, but they just never draw?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like that's where it is hard. And
then another thing you have to understand too is in a card game, like you can't win every game.
That's true.
It's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand, like, if you lost a game, like, what could you have done differently?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you could have done differently? Did you just not do the cards that you needed?
They drew the nuts, you didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it can totally happen. It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, if you'll sit across from your opponent, they'll play something, and you're just like, yeah, I have no answer for that.
Yeah, like, perfect example was on Tuesday in our local. My one loss was to Ron. He just opened up with a very strong opener, and I just could not keep up. And he just had all the right tools at all the right times, so he just rolled over me. And sometimes that happens.
Yeah,
you just have to know that, especially in a game that's best of one. So it sounds like we're rambling, but we're putting it all together because this is a lot to think about when you start putting a deck together for a tournament. Just these little nuances, like, all right, how good is my deck in a best of one? What answers do I have for these other decks that thrive in a best of one? Then what about, okay, you don't want to put the cart before the horse, but you also want to make sure that it can compete in a 2 out of 3 as well. There's a lot of things you have to think about. What interactions do I have with deck A, deck B? There's so much that you have to think about in going into construction. And again, cards haven't even hit the table yet at this point.
I mean, and to the point of like the best of one, the best of 3 thing, I think most decks that perform well in best of 1 tend to also do okay in best of 3.
Mm-hmm.
There are decks that are better in best of 3
mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Decks that rely more heavily on certain draws.
Mm-hmm.
But like I think the way this game works and like the way you have to win, generally,
mm-hmm.
Like best of 1, best of 3, as far as like tiering stuff out, I don't think it would change like the tiers that much.
No, I agree with that.
There are a few decks that I would probably bump up if it was best of 3 format.
Sure.
But not a whole. I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of variance there. But there are decks that you prey on the fact that you don't know what I'm playing.
Exactly.
And you don't have a game to figure it out.
Yep, and that's one of the reasons, to go back to Ohio, that's one of the reasons I audibled onto Fire Ice, because it was super fast. I pretty much kind of took the fourth wall route in this game. I didn't care about what decks were being played. I knew a deck that I knew how to play. It was fast, it was aggressive. I just took a couple. I literally had 5 cards in the deck. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 cards in the deck from the new set, because they complemented the deck I was already playing.
Yep.
And I just proceeded to roll over stuff because they didn't know how to react. But then in a 2 out of 3 situation, I lost my top 4 match because a couple matches, like, all right, cool, I know how to react to this now, or I know what to do. And you know what I mean? Like,
yep.
So sometimes you have a deck that can prey on that.
There's also certain decks too that work the opposite way.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like you could play a very aggressive play and not know what your opponent's playing, but that can also be a bad thing.
Oh yeah, they flop that Odin over on that first point of damage.
Odin,
well, you are set back.
Or like
Leviathan
setting you back further at that point.
Oh, yeah.
There's cards that work against that as well. But sometimes, again, they just don't have it. It's a card game, so
yeah. And that's part of what you have to think about when you start putting decks together. So now we're at the point. Well, we see the meta. We see what we should be expecting moving forward. Nothing new's coming out. Like, it's not like you're going from, like, this tournament's an Opus 5, this one's Opus 6.
Although that does happen.
That does happen with Gen Con, so we'll burn that bridge when we get to it, right? But so it's a matter of, you know what the meta is, you see what people are playing. Now you got to figure out what it is you want to play. Like, that's the next step. Like, what cards do you think can interact with the most? Like, for example, when Opus 5 came out, and I saw a lot of these cards, Fire Ice was where I started, but I really, really wanted to be on Mono Earth because it was a very safe pick, and it turns out a lot of people are on that because it has a lot of answers to a lot of things, and it can play at very different paces. And that's evident by the way the meta is kind of shaped up here. You're seeing Mono Earth all across the world. You're seeing it's winning in Japan. It's it's making up majority of fields and winning in over in Europe. It's making huge splashes here in America.
Yeah, the funny thing is too, and it's like, again, I don't want to ramble too much, but the thing to think about too is it's I think it's probably the most popular deck right now in the competitive scene. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I also think it's the most underperforming deck. But it's also because there's so many people on it.
I agree.
So like if you look at like 2 weeks ago the EU tournament where there was like I want to say it was like 70 people there or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And half the field.
21 or 25 people were on Mono Earth, somewhere in that range.
Oh, yeah.
And none of them made top 8.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I mean, you got to think about things like that, too. And then, like, Mono Earth is very safe.
It's a super safe build.
Yeah, I think it's a very safe deck to bring. But at the same time, too, a lot of people know what's kind of in your deck. And it's really hard to be, like, kind of... there are a few cards that, and we'll get into this later, like teching and stuff, that can be surprises. But I don't think Mono Earth is really, like, that surprising, I guess. There's a few different builds, but... Yeah. And I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, because you're absolutely correct. You are absolutely correct. And that's what makes it a lot harder than it thinks. But now, granted, we're having a lot of dialogue, but a lot of this is happening in your head. You know what I mean? Like when you're looking at cards, you're looking at tournament results. You're like, oh wow, that's really cool. I wonder how that performed for that deck. Like you'll see a mono ice list and they're running like 2 or 3 of a particular card, and you're like, I never thought of that. I wonder how that performed. Then you start looking at the other decks and like the breakdown of the list at the tournament. You're like, now I get why that's there. So you start thinking about that. Maybe that's something you want to try, and then once you've gotten to the point where like, all right, these are the decks I'm playing. Like for example, for me, I've got 3 decks that I'm really honed in on right now, and that's Fire Ice, Water Ice, and Mono Earth. Those are my 3 decks for Opus 5 for the remainder of Opus 5, and those are the 3 that I'm really taking the time to really play. Now, right before Kansas City, I'm gonna Toronto is going to be a huge. It's going to kind of set the pace for what I think Kansas City is going to be. And I know that's different regions, so the meta may be different. But if there's some decks that perform very well in Toronto, you can expect to see them in Kansas City. And same thing, I expect some of the decks that we've seen in these last couple Spring Cups and these European tournaments, some of these Japanese tournaments, I'll bet you a steak dinner that you're going to see a bunch of those in Toronto. It's because these decks are established, they're performing well, so if you're not on them, you better know how to beat them. Or you better be playing a deck that can give you the best chance at beating these various decks, but also doesn't just get dumpstered by some, first round Scatacombs deck.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that's another type of player that you can't really prepare for, but they exist, where it's like people are going to play cards. Like there are players that are just like, oh, people think this card's bad. I'm going to play it. I'm going to build around it.
Yep.
And try to figure it out. And as much as I hate to say it, like generally those players are going to have a hard time making it out like into a cut. But I mean, they're there and they want to try to prove their point.
Oh, absolutely.
And I understand.
And sometimes you just have to be prepared for that. But that's when it's going to come down to not just the deck choice, but also you as the player putting in the reps and knowing what the cards can do. Like if someone vomits out a bunch of like. For example, an archetype that still exists, but it's not popular, it's still very fringe, is like the vomity shell kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, what do they do when you just windmill slam a Dodaluma on turn 1?
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, like then they have to play around that. But like you have to have the wherewithal to be like, okay, I'm going to take some damage, but I need to roadblock this. And you have to really start thinking about your deck construction. Like, all right, what do I have in my deck that can beat this strategy, and vice versa. That something else happens. Yeah. Oh, what do I have in my deck that can beat this? But that's what the best of one's kind of hard because you have to mulligan into something that you can work with.
Yeah.
You want lands and spells pretty much is when you mulligan. You want to have some 2-drop backups. You want to have some forwards you can play. Maybe some interaction. Some removal.
Usually I think the key is like if you have a turn 1 and turn 2 play, most of the time you're okay.
Yep.
But it depends. It really depends on your deck.
It's true.
Some decks really want to see certain things, and again, best of one can't really mulligan for the matchup because you don't know unless you just happen to know the player.
Exactly, and sometimes that's why it's hard to test in a local meta. Like for example, like me and Adam, we can test against each other till blue in the face, but we know our tendencies. He knows I'm a very aggressive player, so I've said this before on the podcast. I come from the camp of I'm gonna make you have it. Mm-hmm. If you don't have it, you just lose. But if you do have it, chances are I'm not going to be able to recover. I'm a very high risk, high reward kind of guy, and I'm like that in Magic. That's actually my one loss at this last F&M was because of that. I was like, well, I've got enough to kill you, even with that blocker. If you've got to settle the wreckage, I just lose.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's sometimes
do you have it?
There's sometimes where you have to make that decision.
Exactly.
And some people will make that decision when they don't have to because they're making a read. You know, there's a lot of things that go into it. And that's like a whole different thing. That's like, I could do a whole podcast on that.
Oh, just on making reads, absolutely.
Just like how different players make different reads and how to appropriately try to make reads and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, and that's where it comes into testing too. Is like testing against these decks, and then from testing, changing your deck accordingly, understanding like why this deck didn't do as good when we played these 5 matches.
Exactly. And that's what you have to give yourself too. You know, while the tournaments are best of one, you have to play. You've got to grind out the matchups. Like if Mono Ice is still a big threat, you need to play Mono Ice until you're just tired of seeing those cards.
I mean, I'll go back to Charlotte, right, where I was testing like only that deck, the one that I ended up playing. Like that was like it. Like I knew that was what I was going to play. I didn't even bring another deck to play, which I don't think I would ever do again. Like I always like to at least bring like.
No, I will always bring 2. I will always bring 2 decks.
But I was pretty much like sold. I was going to play that deck. And through testing, we tested a lot, and I felt pretty confident. And but the one thing that I tested terrible against was Mono Wind. And this is Opus 4. And I was like, man, this tests terrible against Mono Wind, but I'm not going to tech for that deck.
Yeah.
Because how many people are going to be playing that in the field? Now, I ran into it in the tournament, but at the same time, I ran into it and didn't tech for it, but I was prepared for it because I had played it so much. And like between me and Matt, we had played a ton of games, and he made some plays that I think Matt would have shut me down, but he obviously hadn't played against my deck.
Exactly.
So I even though I felt like I was behind at the before we even drew our cards, I was able to like do things because I think he didn't understand the matchup as well as I did, and I was able to do other things because I understood the matchup more than he did. Right.
You knew what cards to play around. You knew when you could kind of go a little more all in or when you had to hold back and take the damage. And that's why I can't stress enough. Knowing the big decks and even the tier 2 decks, like at least knowing what cards are in them. And that's super, super important. And to go back what you just said, I'm so glad you said that because that was going to bring me to my next point. There's no sideboards in this game. So you have to prepare for as many matchups as possible, but also you need to be aware that there's going to be some matchups that, because what do? Do you tech a lot for this one deck and leave yourself vulnerable for the rest of the field because you're so afraid of this one deck? Or do you just know that deck's hard to play, no one's going to play that, this, that, and the other, like this is a different kind of deck that, it's really going to rely on the skill of the pilot. I might put maybe a card or 2 that can help me interact with certain decks better. But for the most part, I'm sticking to my game plan. I know this does well against this deck. It does well against this deck. It gives me a favorable matchup against this deck. That is 4 of the 5 top decks in the game. I think I'm okay. You know what I mean? Like it's you can't just, you don't want to leave yourself vulnerable. I would, it's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few kind of thing.
Yep. And I mean, I'll like just to throw this in there, like obviously, like if you're planning on heading to Toronto or whatever, like you better be prepared for mono lighting. You better be prepared for mono ice. Earth ice is like pretty much in a lot of places now.
Yep. Mono water.
Mono water. Typically, I would probably say Facilia right now.
Yep.
That seems to be really popular. Fire ice is picking up steam.
It's winning a lot. It's.
I see it like in top 8s at least most of the time. Mono Earth, obviously, is a big deal. Like I'd say the big 3 are that you would 100% have to be prepared for is Mono Earth, Mono Lighting, Mono Ice.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Like you should be prepared to deal with any type of card that's going to come from those 3 decks, even like the one-offs that like you need to be prepared for. Like,
and be prepared for that backup destruction Hecaton chair, even if it's not there. Like. Be aware that if you've got a 3-drop backup or higher, like your anthems, just be aware that thing could get blown up any second.
So I'd say like I would gear my tech choices toward those
absolutely.
3 that help me improve matchups. And then,
absolutely.
I mean, well, we're already talking about tech choices now. It's like you want to make your matchups better without making a ton of your matchups worse. I think the way you do that in this game is one-ups, kind of.
Yes.
Like, your tech choices end up being one-ups. I mean, look at, like, Okimoto's list from Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, those were obviously, like, he wanted to have those cards because they did something in certain matchups. And he had ways to search pretty much all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, I'm just going to put him in as a one-up. I mean, that's not something... I wouldn't do that many one-ups.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a personal thing. But I understand why he did it.
Oh, absolutely.
And it makes sense. And yeah, like, you want to prepare toward those bigger decks. Like, for example, like, you see Lightning now. Like, Lightning's running Exodus because they need answers to certain things. It's like, it's really good against Earth. It kills Kamlanat after he's changed, which is a big deal.
Yep.
And then, it's not bad against other stuff. So it's not really a dead card. But it helps you against that matchup and that specific card that sees a lot of play. So.
And then you also got to think about, too, Opus 4 brought us monsters. Monsters are all over the place. But also they're not all over the place. Like that's I'd call monsters tier 1, but also kind of fringe. They're kind of.
I would say that's probably one of the hardest decks to really prepare for, because if you tech too much, because like again, and I think I said this on the last podcast, it's like those cards that deal with those cards effectively, like the most effectively, are narrow.
And they only deal with those.
So they become dead. Those cards become dead in other matchups. And you don't want that. You don't want too much of that. You maybe could put in one or two, but at that point, like, why,
Exactly, because chances are you're not going to see them. Unless you have a way to search them out, you're not going to see them. Yeah. So, like, you really have to be prepared. But also, too, like we said last week, and that's why, Monsters isn't all over the place, because the biggest hurdle is playing the deck itself.
Yeah, it's a hard deck to play.
That's why I switched from Water Earth Monsters in Charlotte to Earth Ice, because I couldn't play that deck effectively. I didn't know how to play the right lines. So I was like, I'm going to play a deck that I know how to play.
Yeah.
And I felt like I did better because of it. So.
Yep.
But so now we're narrowing it down. We're thinking about tech choices. We're building decks at this point.
Yeah.
This is where we're at. We've narrowed it down. Like I said, I've got my 3 decks that I'm playing, but there's always room for teching. So now you're playing matches. Now you're testing against each other. Now these matches, you're playing legit matches, but your testing group, you're also talking through stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like we'll play a game and it's like, like I've got this. Then we start talking about this interaction. All right, well, cool. Well, you've got that on your side of the board. I'm going to play this. What do you do against that? Like, I have to assume you have this before I even do that, or I assume that you don't have. You know what I mean? Like, you start talking through the scenarios that the ones that are most likely to come up, plus ones that are like, that's a real wonky interaction. I wonder, maybe I know something that my opponent might not know with this interaction. You know what I mean? So you kind of hedge your bets there, because you're not so much. Remember, because you're not just playing against the deck. You're also playing against the player. And the human error is there. Misplays are very, very real. So if you do something, they might not know how to react to it, and they may misplay because they don't know what's going on. Like you maybe do something like maybe a sequence weird, but you know what you're doing, but they don't.
I mean, and again, I'll cite back to Charlotte, same matchup, right? I was playing against the wind guy, right? And I already knew that my matchup was bad. I intentionally held Earth cards. I did not pitch them when I should have. Like, if I was playing you or Matt or something and you knew what deck I was playing, I would have pitched them because it just made more sense to pitch to pay for other things.
Yep.
I intentionally held, like, multiple Earth cards that I could have played in certain situations to force him to overextend into a Shantota.
Yep.
Because if he just sees water on my side of the field, like, why would he...
Why give away what you're playing? Yeah. Exactly.
So I mean, there's things like that, and again, once you get to like the 2 out of 3, a lot of those things, that's like a 1-game trick.
Yeah, some of that goes out the window, but
yeah, I mean, it's just something that you have to be aware of, and that could happen to you while you're playing too. Like a lot of times now, I'll try to figure out like when I see certain cards that I'm like, okay, that's weird that you're playing ice, and I see that card, you must like maybe you're playing another element, kind of stuff like that. But it's tough.
Oh, absolutely. But then the other thing too is then. So you're testing, you're having matches, you're winning some, you're losing some, but then you're going to hit a point where you get frustrated. Like, you're playing a deck that it does well against so many things, but then you just keep getting dumpstered by Mono Earth. Shit. Then you start thinking, what am I doing wrong? Is my deck choice bad? What can I do to, I'm going, I'm 6-4 against mono ice, I'm 6-4 against mono water, but I am fucking 0-10 against mono earth. What do? That's the next step. You got to figure out either A, what cards in that deck are giving you a problem. Is it the EX burst on the damage? Is it Wool? Is it the Hecaton chairs? So at that point, you have to look at the deck you're playing and say, all right, what can I do to interact better or to have an answer for the cards that are beating me in this deck? And then it's back. Then once you have that, it's back to the table. And you don't just play the Earth matchups again. You have to play the other matchups too, so those changes don't sacrifice, what you're doing in those matchups as well. So there's several layers of testing. And then when you finally hit that happy medium, like me, I'm content with a deck when it tests well against the majority of the field. And if I lose to maybe a deck, it's like, all right, you know what? Again, I'm not gonna I'm gonna hedge my bets. Like for a perfect example was in Boston, the Fire Ice matchup versus Mono Ice. Like I wasn't terribly comfortable with it because if I overextend, they're just gonna strip my hand out. Well, guess how many Mono Ice decks I ran into that day? 0.
Yep.
0. So the one matchup I was afraid of, I never even saw. Mm-hmm. But the matchups I was comfortable against, I saw all day long because I was like, well, this should be, pretty good. I mean, granted, yes, I lost to you. You're still going to lose because sometimes you just don't draw what you need. And sometimes you just get blown away by something you weren't expecting. But point is, you can't prepare for everything, but you need to prepare for as much as you can without sacrificing the consistency of the deck. And then once you hit that point, you pick another deck. If you find, because I am a firm believer of taking at least 2 decks to a tournament with you, just in case, because we like to call the old Adam's Audible around here. But so about you, Adam? Like my mindset is and now granted in this deck it's like, you know what, I'm going to play a deck with Final Fantasy 6 characters in it. Like that's typically where I start because the cards are good. I know how they interact. I know the best times to play them, and then I'll start there. Then I'll start testing matchups. Then, like I would say my top 2 decks right now are Fire Ice and Mono Earth. They've both put up very good results for me. And I know them, and I know how they interact with the matchups. So chances are these are the decks I'm taking with me to Kansas City. Spoiler alert. But that doesn't matter. You need to be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like I know how to deal with your deck.
I mean, knowing where you're sitting across only helps you with so much.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just have to play.
Yeah.
And sometimes the decks are just that good.
Yeah.
And I feel like Earth and like even Fire Ice, like they're good enough to where like, okay, yeah, if I'm sitting across from you and I know what you're playing, like that's cool. Like I mean, I played like Sam caught me off guard in Charlotte the first game we played because I wasn't expecting to be all long, but I knew what he was playing the second time and the third time.
Oh yeah.
But I still lost.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like I can't, and he still played really well.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna happen. Like,
yep, because after the point you're playing the decks, you're also playing the players because like these Crystal Cups, you're going to be in a room full of killers.
Yeah.
So like you have to go in knowing that like even in that first round, unless they give you an audible cue like, oh hey, I'm new to the game or something, they give you something silly that's like, wait a minute, like you have to assume that they're a killer in their own right. Like, I don't know what results they put up in their logo. I could be playing against somebody I don't know.
In the tournament, in a big tournament like that, I'm sorry, but it's like Karate Kid mentality at that point.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'm sweeping the leg.
Strike hard, strike fast, no mercy, sir. You damn right.
Yeah, it's a tournament. I'm there to win.
Yep.
And that's how I'm going to have to do it. It doesn't matter if someone sits down to me, across from me, like, hey, go easy. This is my first time. Like, I'm sorry that
you picked the wrong
I'm sorry
place.
This is your first tournament.
Yeah, you picked the wrong play. Now, I'll jam with you when the match is over. I'll sit there and talk with you all day long afterwards, but... yeah, at that point you are the enemy for that 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, even if it's one of us, if it's you, if it's Matt, it's for that round, like that.
Oh yeah, like and here's the thing too, be really and if you have the time, 30 minutes is a lot of time. It doesn't sound like it when you compare it to other games, but unless you are intentionally slow playing, you have time to think about your card choices. You have time to look at what's on the board before you make a play. So being able to keep your misplays to a minimum is how you're going to win. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds like a very silly, like a John Madden thing. Oh, whoever makes the least mistakes is going to win. Well, no shit. But sometimes people get so caught up in the time, because I know it is a fine line. It is a fine line from playing slow just to drain time off the clock to put your opponent on tilt and to legitimately make plays. Like, like if my opponent's sitting there like they're putting cards down, like doing math, like they're clearly thinking about the next step. But if they're just sitting there like flicking their cards and just kind of staring off, you're playing slow. So, and that can put somebody on tilt. I know that's kind of an off-topic thing, but like that goes into the mentality of playing the game. Because again, you've got your deck, you're there, you're there at the tournament, and then this guy's just going to put you on tilt, which is going to cause you to just go into a downward spiral. No matter all the testing you've done, everything you've done up to this point is just going to get thrown out the window.
Yeah,
know what I mean?
And I mean that is kind of part of tournament prep a little bit. Like you have to be prepared. Like you can't let a loss just like send you to the dumpster. Like
yes,
like I said before, it's a card game. Mm-hmm. You are going to lose.
Yeah,
it is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Very rarely does someone go undefeated the entire day.
If you went undefeated, good job. You probably played really well. And that's great. But you better still be ready for top 8.
Yep, and then you better be ready for the next tournament because you got the target on your back. At
like
that point.
You can't go to a tournament expecting to go all the way through to win and not lose at all. Like in 2 out of 3s, you're probably going to win a lot of 2-1s.
Oh yeah. Well, and my big thing is, and this is my mentality, I just need to get to the top cut. Because once I get to the cut, it's a whole new tournament. And, and that's how I look at it. I see the light at the end of the tunnel, but for me, when I go to a tournament, the light at the end of the tunnel is whatever the cut is. I need to be good enough to make the cut. I don't need to be top seed. I don't care if I squeak in at number 15.
Yeah, I don't care either. Yeah.
If I make the top cut, you better be ready because that's what happened at the winner box. I squeaked into top 8. I was 3-2. Mm-hmm. Like I think I was the 7th or 8th seed. Made it to grand finals because I had a brand new tournament. Everything that happened in Swiss didn't matter anymore. We've got a fresh tournament in front of us. So, and that again, having that mindset. Don't put the cart before the horse. Play your matchups as they come, and that's why you're testing. You're testing to know these matchups as you play them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, like at that point, like you've decided on one deck at this point. Like you know what you're taking. And then after the tournament, like, you have to, like, there's still stuff to be done after the tournament's over, too.
There's a lot more assessment. So you've taken your deck, say it tested very well, but say there's 7 rounds of Swiss, say you go 3 and 4. Say, all the testing you did, it just didn't work out that time. The next step is to figure out what you did wrong, where you made the mistakes. It's not that, it's not that you just got outplayed. I have a hard time believing you got outplayed 4 out of 7 matches. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You made mistakes somewhere along the line, either in deck choice, evaluating the meta, or sequencing in the way you played your cards. You know what I mean? Like, you can trace back, if you're a good player, you can trace back why you lost to a particular event. And but then again, I know I said earlier that sometimes your opponent just draws the nuts, and they have the answers. But you know what? That's going to be a lot fewer and far between.
Well, that should also be your last thing that you think about. Like, like at first you should be like, okay, could I have done anything differently to win that? Did I need to play my cards this way? Should I have played it this way? And then after you've gone through everything, then you can be like, okay, he just drew better than me.
Yeah.
He had more answers than I had, and I couldn't deal with certain things, and I feel like I played as best as I could. I still like to think that there's still a few things that you could have done. Like, I try to figure that out for myself.
As soon as I lose a match, that's the first thing I do.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I do.
So, and I mean, that goes with testing, too. You do that when you test, also.
Because it'll make this... If you do this during testing, it'll make this situation a lot easier. You know what I mean? Because say in testing, you and I are playing a match in testing, and I beat you, and you know why immediately. That happens again, like in tournament. You're like, yep, I've seen this before. There's nothing I can do. He got me. Shit. Or you're like, if I'd have seen this card instead of this one, I could have dealt with that on the spot. You know what I mean? Like there's a bunch of means to a bunch of ends.
Well, the thing is, find them. Especially in this game, you can usually go back to some mistake that you made because
this game is unforgiving. Sometimes
you could have pitched something 3 turns prior that set you up for something 3 turns later that you couldn't do because you pitched that card. Yep. I've done it a couple times, more than a couple times.
Well, and that makes for those awkward moments where you're sitting there trying to decide what you're... And this is where it goes back to managing the time as well, where you've got this play you want to make, but you don't know what card to pitch because they're all equally as important to the deck's core. And it's like, I need to keep this one, but which one can I afford to get rid of now because I know I can recur it later. I know there's another one in the deck. There's 2 more in the deck. Like, these are the decisions you have to make in this game. And, and that's why it goes back to testing the deck and the matchups. Knowing that if I'm playing on Mono Earth, I'm playing against Mono Ice, can I pitch this guy to pay for something else? No. More times than not, no. You're not pitching your guys. You're not pitching your Yangs. Those guys are staying in your hand until you can play them because that's how you beat that matchup. Now, if I'm playing against Mono Water, maybe you can start thinking about pitching that guy for something else. But sometimes, maybe not. What if they play like an Ultimecia later or something? Maybe that guy's not effective anymore. You got to start thinking about the deck composition. Now, granted, if someone's playing Ultimecia in a Mono Water build, they're probably going to catch you slipping because no one's really playing that right now.
Yeah, I mean, you might run into that too, but again, you can't prepare for everything. It's not possible.
Right, so. and you've got 2 walls in your hand. Do you want to pitch one to pay for the other one, or do you want to have the mindset that this guy's he's a removal target?
Yep.
Is he going to get removed? Do I put that one out there to bait out the removal, and then I play the other one? Like this is what you're testing. You're testing these interactions against the various decks to see how consistent your build's actually going to end up being, and that's the important part. So it's a lot of reps. Like testing in this game is reps, 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 reps. And that's where you're going. And the more comfortable you become with the deck, the more matchups you see, the better you are going to do. I guess like the Men's Warehouse. You're going to like the way you look. I guarantee it.
Yeah, it's like a loop. Like you keep doing it. It's like just test, change, test again, change again, test, maybe change back, test.
Yep.
And you just keep doing that until you refine it to a certain point where you feel like it's good.
And then the big thing is the morning you wake up for the tournament, the morning you go, give yourself the night before. If you're going to audible, give yourself the night before. But the day of, unless you're Andrew Lane right before the tournament, really be prepared to have the deck that you've landed on that night. Unless you lose sleep over it, be prepared to play that deck and just be comfortable with it. And just know your outs, know your matchups. Like, be smart. Just be smart with your choice. Have faith in your deck choice. It's not like we're doing like a self-help thing. Be strong with your deck choice. Feel good about yourself. But that's the mindset you have to have. You have to get up that morning knowing that I can do this. Mm-hmm. Like if you beat yourself before the tournament even starts, you're gonna lose. So, that's why you did all that testing. LeBron James, he's not Allen Iverson. He practices. He goes to practice. He gets ready for the postseason by practicing, by going through the motions. And it shows. He's also a freak of nature, but that's neither here nor there. But that's why testing and reps and practice is so important, especially in this game.
Yep.
And then, like you said, even after the tournament, it's not over because you're going to spend the rest of that day talking about it, whether you made the cut or not. You're going to spend the rest of the day wondering, did I do wrong? What did I do right? What interactions did I play right?
Yeah. And I mean, I'll kind of end it on this because I don't want to drag too much longer. Mm-hmm. When after I'm out or whatever, the tournament's over, I assess myself first and foremost. Like you said, like what did I do wrong? Mm-hmm. Were my tech choices good? Was my deck just bad? Mm-hmm. Like did I do that? Like was that my fault? Mm-hmm. And I mean I had that happen at like a local tournament that I won Winter Box where I was trying to play Fire Earth and I was like, man, my deck sucked.
Yep.
And that was my fault. Mm-hmm. Like I put together a pile of crap.
Yep.
And it just didn't work. It didn't work like I envisioned it working.
Yep.
And so, but like especially in Boston, like a big tournament, like okay, after I've gone through that, I'm gonna start going around and talk to like people that like had success. Yeah. I'm gonna be like, what were you playing? Can I see what you played? Like, how did this card work for you? Mm-hmm. Did it overachieve? Did it do what you thought it was gonna do? Did you have cards that didn't work? Mm-hmm. Like what sucked? Why did you lose this one matchup? And I'll try to like pick people's brains.
Oh, yeah.
Like because at the end of the day, like. Maybe it's like to form Voltron or some shit. Like I want to bring as much of that to my play as I can.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if it worked for someone else, chances are it's probably good.
Right, and they probably thought about it in a way that you weren't thinking of.
So, I mean, and you can bring that back to the table, and it doesn't necessarily have to be for the deck that you played. It could be for another deck.
Absolutely.
You know, so, I mean, it's a lot of ways to improve.
Yeah, well, all I know is, and, you know, take with this what you will for anybody listening. And, you know, I've had great tournament success. I've won a couple, but I've made the cuts in majors, but I haven't won a major, and I want to. That's the next notch on my belt. But the mindset I have when I go to all of these tournaments, when I sit down in front and cross from my opponent, you know, all I want to do is look them in the face and say, I'll give you the first 6 points of damage for free, but you're going to fight me for the last one.
Yep.
You know, I have that mentality that we're going to exchange blows. It's going to be a slobber knocker. I'm not discounting what you're going to do, but you're going to fight me to beat me. And, you know, if I'm able to pull ahead and just get away with the win without looking back, then I have the right mindset. If it's a close one or if I get blown out, I still have the right mindset because I did the best I could for you to beat. You know, you had to beat me. You're not just going to roll over. I'm not going to roll over for anybody in a tournament.
Oh yeah.
You know, I won't scoop. I'm going to make you. I'm going to watch you take that last point of damage. I'm not going to be like, "Yep, you got it." The game will finish to its conclusion.
Yeah. Well, there's some situations where I will totally scoop, but I
won't. Wait till the end.
Because I mean, when Anthony Figueroa dropped drums on me and I was sitting at like 5 points of damage, I was like, "There's nothing I can draw that will even let me last 2 turns." And I know I'm dead.
I'm going to make him do it. I'm going to make him swing.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll make him swing.
So, I mean, but the thing is, like, I just his board and Zemus. Like, I had no answer for Zemus. So.
Yeah, fair. A lot of good cards that are purple, turns out.
Yeah.
But like, take that, and that's, I urge everybody to do that. Like, if you're going to the major tournaments, even if you're going to local tournaments and you want to perfect a deck, practice with it. Think about it. You know, whatever test group you're in, talk about the choices. Like me out in our group chat and the returners group chat, we are theory fighting. If you're on the outside looking in, it looks like we're having arguments, but we're like talking about, well, you know, it's almost like Bill and Ted. If I go back in time and put this here, then you can do. It turns into that. Like it turns into, you know, if I have this card, you have this. This is going to happen because this. It's like, well, no, but then you have, you know, the layers start showing up, and that gives us like the mindset to. Well, you know what? Let's try that out. Let's see what happens when you put it in a deck. Let's put rubber to road and see what happens. And a lot of times, you know, and sometimes I'm wrong. You know, sometimes he's wrong. But it's a matter of testing it out and seeing how the interactions go.
Yep.
And sometimes we're both dead ass wrong. Old Matt Jordan rolls in and is like, nope, you should have done this from the start.
Yep.
So, and that's why having a test group and testing and putting in the time and effort for it. Like, you know, if you know a tournament like Kansas City, I know that's the next big one I'm going. Zorn and Thorn Cup's the next big one I'm going to. I know it's a local event, but it's the Villain Series.
I mean, last time it was pretty big, and I don't want to go on a tangent, but last time it was pretty good size.
It was a great size tournament, and that's what I'm preparing for now.
Oh yeah, me too.
Any testing I'm doing, any decks I'm playing, other than maybe like because I think now on the Tuesday, since we're getting closer to that, I'm probably going to play a little more competitive decks. I'm not going to play busted shit, but I'm going to play stuff that I'm going to play decks with interactions I'm looking to play at this tournament.
Yep.
And in the last couple Tuesdays leading up to that, you best believe I'm going to be playing the decks that I'm looking forward to turn. But give yourself like a couple weeks. If you have a month notice, the minute you have that notice, play your fun decks, but you set aside some practice time.
I mean, I've been thinking about what to play for Kansas City for a month and a half.
Since they announced it.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, you know, it's all about that. Like, just giving yourself the most amount of time, like you said.
Mm-hmm. And just knowing how to do it right. But you know, hope you guys can get something out of this. I know it sounded kind of rambly, but it's a lot of mindset. Like, testing for tournaments, it's 90% mindset and knowing where, because once you figure out where you're going to start, the rest of the pieces will fall into place. But with that being said, we're probably going to sign off there. We got a couple things coming up. We have one more week for the Saban giveaway.
Yes, I think what we're going to do is next week probably announce the winner of that. At some point, I'll reach out to whoever wins, probably through a YouTube message, since you have to be a subscriber and you have to do the comment.
Yep.
So again, there's still time to enter the contest. All you have to do is go comment on our previous podcast episode as of right now.
It was episode 8.
And leave a comment based on what we said in the episode, and then subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then that energy to win. I think right now probably we have a decent amount of entries, so I mean it should be pretty cool. And then we're gonna play that match out, and that'll probably be released next week sometime.
Yeah, because we were gonna record that video today as well, but we were like, Oh yeah, we got to put the starter decks back together, don't we? We're
Yeah.
like, well, shit. Okay, well, we'll figure that out. But it's going to happen because that's we want to be able to play that match and see who was right. And I think seeing some of the comments, we'd be like, oh yeah, you know what, Homeboy was right. This person was right.
Yep.
But we got a lot of content coming down the pipe. We had a little bit of a lull there. We've got some more videos we're working on. We've just been busy. It's just summertime. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, ideally I want to release one a week if I can, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to fall behind or anything like that. And then, other than that, next week we're going to hit double digits for episode count.
Episode number 10. That's a big deal for us.
So my plan is probably going to start putting this on iTunes and stuff. So if you're listening to this, try to, even if you listen to it on YouTube or if you listen to it on SoundCloud, maybe you could give us a download, maybe give us like a review or whatever. It'll help a lot to push people up the list on iTunes.
No, we'd be super, super thankful if you did.
But that's probably going to happen like next week sometime. So, yeah, I guess with that said, I think this has been a really good episode, honestly.
It's been good, man. Just a very, very round table discussion, and I like more like that where we can just kind of talk about what's on our brain, and feel free, when this video comes up on YouTube, comment some of the things that you do when you test, some of the mindsets you take. Or if there's a list you want to test and you're curious about it, go ahead and shoot it our way for our Blitz Tech. Maybe we can, kind of put our process of thought into it, and maybe that'll help you out.
Yep, and we're starting to get through a lot of those. So yeah, just keep sending them our way for sure. So yeah, I guess with that, we'll sign off for this week. Look forward to next week's episode. We're not really sure what the topic's going to be, but we'll definitely be there.
We figure it out as we go. We're very much on the cusp like that. But guys, thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.
Yep.